Every one of my tapes is carefully curated. Each one tells a story.
Welcome to the Dreams of Consciousness podcast. If you'd be so kind, would you mind introducing yourself?
Hello, my name is Anders. I'm a vocalist for the Norwegian metal band She Said Destroy.
She Said Destroy, Norwegian metal band.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And in terms of metal, how would you describe the music of She Said Destroy? Like, is there a specific genre that you feel you guys belong to, or maybe several genres that you pull from?
I would say several genres. Yeah, we've been we've kind of been known to incorporate stuff from all over the place, actually, but often from the more extreme parts of metal, but also a lot from some of us that started out this band, we have a background in hardcore. So, whereas others like me are more came from a background in thrash metal and black metal. So it's we're kind of all over the place, I would say. Fairly intense.
So from the music that I've heard from She Said Destroy, it seems that you pull from a lot of, indeed, black metal, as you mentioned, and some old school thrash, but a lot of post-hardcore, their ambient sections, and there are even some sections that are in unorthodox time signatures, similar to what a band like Meshuggah would do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Would you say that's a fair comparison?
Absolutely. It's, I mean, I guess it kind of comes from our age and what we grew up with, what we kind of were, like what kind of music we were into when we started this band, or when I started this band, which is pretty long time ago now. And it kind of, So I would say that's an accurate observation.
Now, is this intentional? Was it part of the reason behind the band to combine types of music or different subgenres of metal that aren't usually heard together?
Yeah, I guess. I don't know if that was like the initial agenda, but it kind of just happens because we wanted to play sort of, we wanted to play something really heavy, but we didn't want to stick to like the confines of one special genre. And as I said, we were people with different backgrounds from music, but we kind of also agreed on a lot of things. So like when I started out this band, it kind of, the whole idea of starting the band was actually initiated by one particular show back in, this band started in 2000. So it's actually 21 years ago. But the whole idea was initiated back in 1999 when I hadn't been playing music for a while, and I went to a show here in Oslo in Norway, which was this amazing tour package with Neurosis, Voivod, and Today's the Day. And I just remember that all of these bands, which are kind of so their own thing and so like really heavy, but so outside of being one particular genre and in each of their way, kind of inspired me to. I remember thinking like, okay, this is what these guys are doing. This is what I want to do. Is not particularly kind of try and do exactly what these bands are doing, but the idea of just making music, making heavy music, but not really caring about belonging to a special scene or anything like that.
So when you say that you guys didn't want to be pigeonholed in a specific scene or be lumped in with a specific scene, I have to bring up the fact that you guys are in fact Norwegian. And, when people hear metal band from Norway, they have a very specific sound and image in mind.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. And that was kind of, I grew up in the midst of the kind of what has been called the second wave of Norwegian black metal. I got into black metal back in 94, and I was only a kid and I was 14. Fairly quickly started to play in a black metal band and kind of experienced the whole kind of scene fairly close up. And it was an inspiring time, but also quite frustrating. Like it was a very hard scene to try to belong to when you're a kid, because it was kind of, a lot of people were fairly vicious and not very including and stuff like that. And which kind of comes with the territory, like the stories most people have heard from that period kind of ends with church burnings and murders. And although that wasn't kind of the everyday of the black metal scene, I have to say that it was a strange time. And after playing that music for a while, and I kind of took a break from music, it wasn't that tempting to try to belong to a particular scene. Actually, I still wanted to pull like inspiration from black metal in terms of music, and maybe like, you know, like some lyrical images and stuff. But other than that, it was kind of, I just remember I wanted to, you know, do my own thing. And that was kind of the idea behind the band.
So I think it's safe to say that She Said Destroy doesn't, you know, there aren't a lot of bands like you guys or who sound like you guys or combine elements the way that you guys do. Mm. Would you say that's fair?
Well, I mean, there's nowadays I guess it's become, in the international kind of scene, it's become harder and harder to actually pin down bands to belong to one special genre, unless that is their intention, that they kind of want to play retro thrash metal or stuff like that. It's become, I guess it's kind of become the norm that bands kind of take influence from a lot of different places. So in some way, I would say we're not unique, but still, I kind of think we have a certain uniqueness to us, that, you know, that we kind of combine some things that others maybe haven't. I'm not sure. It's kind of hard to look at it from the inside. You know, it's yeah.
I understand. Well, I'm curious. You know, since you guys, you know, you aren't a retro thrash band and you aren't specifically a black metal band, how would you describe a fan of She Said Destroy? How would you describe the people who follow your music and like what you do?
I mean, it's been a long time since we were actually out playing. Like, that's over 10 years ago since we actually played shows. So we've only kind of stuck to making music and recording since then. But I would say they often have a tendency of not being particularly narrow-minded. Like, often, I mean, I remember we used to do shows where you play for maybe you play for an audience that's not typically metal, and that often had a tendency of working better than like if we played with only thrash metal or black metal bands, for example. But I don't know. What is typical She Said Destroy fan? Huh.
I mean, if there isn't one, then that's an answer as well.
I guess there's not someone who really loves discovering music. I would say I would probably say something like the way I feel myself about music, where I'm rooted, like my whole interest in music is rooted in super heavy, fairly extreme music, but I also listen to everything, like from extremely mellow jazz to electronic music to like guilty pleasures within pop music, or, you know, whatever. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Can you tell me a little bit about the history of the band and what led you guys to form originally?
It was initially my idea to start the band back 21 years ago. And I had this desire to try and play, start a band that had like a basis in fairly extreme metal, but kind of took inspiration from everywhere. And I started it up with a couple of friends that I had played with before. It took a couple of years before we kind of found our way. And also we changed some members along the way in the beginning. And back in 2004, we made a demo that we thought we were extremely proud of. And I started shopping around for a label, and then struck up with the Norwegian label Nocturnal Art Productions, which is run by the guitar player in Emperor. And that kind of opened a lot of doors for us back then. So when we released our first album, I believe that was in 2005 or 6, I can remember, probably 2006. We got a lot of good shows, and we kind of were on our way to somewhere. And then we released another album, and we started gearing down in terms of live playing. We played a lot of festivals, and we played a lot of support shows for bigger bands. And then after a while, it got kind of complicated to try to keep the whole live unit together, because we had a couple of session members for live playing. Our band now is based in 2 countries. Like I'm the only one at the moment. I'm the only one living in Norway. The whole band consists of Norwegians, but the other guys are living in Lithuania. And back then, people were also living in different countries in England and Norway. So it was kind of challenging to keep that live unit together, and it took a lot of work. So we kind of lost interest in playing live because it was just stressful. And then we just decided to become this more or less of a studio project. So that's as a studio project, we released an EP back in 2012, and then we kind of went underground until now. Like it took us, because we've been so busy with each of our projects, that kind of took us 8 years before we started working on this album, and a lot of back and forth. Like it was really hard to start up again, but we never intended to disappear, kind of. So that's kind of the backstory of the band. And right now the band consists of me and this guy Snorre, who's, I would say, the main songwriter at the moment. He joined in, he's been in the band since 2005. Another guitar player, Bjorn, he also joined shortly after Snorre, maybe 2006 or 7. And our drummer, Sindre, he's fairly new. He works with these guys in they run a studio in Lithuania. And yeah, he's an extremely talented drummer. We kind of just decided to bring him in since they were based there, and it was easier for us to do all the recording stuff and songwriting in Lithuania.
So you mentioned the EP that you released in 2012, and prior to that, in 2008, you released your second album. So am I correct in saying that you guys had never planned on going on hiatus or taking off from the band? It's just the members were living in different parts of the world, and so that's what led to the inactivity? Yeah,
absolutely. That's what happens. Like we actually recorded that EP that we released in 2012. We recorded it in 2009, and it was recorded after we kind of decided to not play live anymore. And then stuff just happened. Like the other guys were busy with the studio work. They work as producers, so they were busy with that. And I have this other project called Beaten to Death, which is a grindcore band that I started playing in back then. And that suddenly got really busy, and then you have work, and then you just have life happening, and it kind of just took time to get back on track.
So as we record this podcast, you guys are just about to release your third album, which is called Succession. Given the difficulty with you guys living in different parts of the world, what was the impetus for recording this album? What eventually brought you guys back together?
It's been this conversation between me and the guy I mentioned, Snorre, that's been running over years. That like we talked about how we really wanted to get back on track and do this third album. And him and the other guitar player they'd been writing songs steadily. I'd been writing lyrics, and I had several ideas stored up for this. And I just remember they'd done some demos for a couple of songs that they'd been working on that I just thought sounded amazing, and it kind of lit the fire again, I guess. And then we just found out that okay, let's really try to do this now, and just sort of instead of just talking about doing it. And so we kind of just started going through the songs, the material that we had, and started talking about concepts for the album, ideas for the lyrics, and artwork and everything. And then we just set a date. Like they started recording instruments, and then I tried to get. I was traveling to Europe with my other band, with Beaten to Death, and just decided to try and kind of schedule the recording sessions to that period, so I can just go straight from the show when I finished doing shows to Lithuania to work on the album.
Tell me a little bit about your songwriting process, how you guys usually put songs together, and if that process has changed at all since your last album.
Well, the process has definitely changed. Like over the course of the whole career of the band. When the band started out, yes, I was the main songwriter, and most of the material was worked out in the rehearsal space with the whole band. And that just gradually changed when we kind of ended up not being in the same country at the same time. So, and then I back in the days when we started the band, I used to play guitar, but I stepped down from the guitar duties after several years. And then I also kind of started writing less and less, and the other guys started writing more and more. So like now, I guess most of the songwriting is done but separately. Like they work on the songs separately, and then the guys meet up in the studio and kind of do some demos, and then take it from there. So it's definitely changed over the years. Like the second album we did, 2008 album, was kind of a combination of the kind of different writing styles, where some of the stuff was written together with the whole band, and some of it, or actually a lot of it, was written basically at home. Yeah.
With the change in writing process, how do you compare the songs on Succession to the songs on the previous album, The City Speaks in Tongues?
I think I would say that the songs now are slightly more mature and focused. Like I think The City Speaks in Tongues is a really good album, fairly intense album, but you can kind of hear that at times we kind of tried to do a lot of stuff in the same songs. And I mean, we still kind of do that, but I think we've also kind of taken a step back and decided to give the music a bit of space that we maybe didn't do back in the days. This is something I think changed with that EP, which was basically one song recorded, one song that is about 25 minutes long, where we tried out, just giving, we tried out to give music some breathing space. And then on this album, we kind of got back to shorter and more intense songs, but still we wanted to keep that kind of, a feel of, being intense, but not stressing the music. So I'm extremely satisfied with the results.
You mentioned Snorri has his recording studio in Lithuania, which I believe is called, I'm going to get this wrong, so feel free to correct me. But I'm gonna try to say Ymir Audio. Is that close?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, Ymir Audio. Yeah, Ymir Audio. Yeah.
And this is Snorri's own studio. Mm-hmm. Is this the first time that you worked with Snorri as an engineer and as a producer?
Yeah, I guess he co-produced the EP in 2009, but he wasn't engineering it himself. So this is the first, but kind of the whole process of our previous albums before that EP as well was kind of what made Snorri set out on becoming a producer. Like that's where his interest started, I guess. And this is the first time that we've done everything ourselves, where he's kind of just taken the lead on everything, and where he takes care of engineering and producing and everything, mastering everything. And I think interestingly enough, this is also the first like proper metal album that's been recorded in his studio, like extreme metal album. So he's also kind of been gearing up to do this She Said Destroy thing, that he really wanted it to be a very good end product.
I'm curious, what kind of band does he usually record?
All sorts of genres, like from like super commercial pop to country to punk to all sorts of stuff. I have an impression that his studio is fairly popular in the region. Like he's made a name for himself in Lithuania and the neighboring countries, as far as I can see.
Is Lithuanian country music something I should be aware of? Is that going to be the next Norwegian black metal?
Well, it might be. I have to say I am. Even though the rest of the band actually live there, I have not listened that much to Lithuanian music, I'm sorry to say.
Why Lithuania? I'm not sure if you know the answer to this, but...
Snorri lived in the UK back in the days, and he met his girlfriend there, and she's from Lithuania. She's an artist from Lithuania, and they went to school, to music school in the UK, and they basically decided to move back to Lithuania. And after a while, when we stopped playing live, Bjorn, the other guitar player, also decided to move down there to kind of work with Snorri as the producer. So they're just
Let's talk about the recording just a little bit. So you guys actually went to Ymir, to Snorri's studio just before the pandemic hit, right?
Yeah, it was recorded. When was I there? I think it was like in the middle of February 2020. And I remember flying back, and I started to see people wearing face masks. It was, then the whole lockdown was only a couple of weeks away. I think I got back to Norway at the very end of February. So it was only, So it was pure luck that we actually decided in that timing. I mean, if we got delayed and we decided to do it later in 2020, this album wouldn't have happened yet. So, or we would have to find a different solution to it. So that was a lucky break.
Were you guys able to get all your tracking in before the lockdown? Yeah,
absolutely. Everything was done. But the other guys had already finished the drum tracking and everything before I got there. So while I was there, we were focusing on vocals and just kind of talking about the ideas and stuff for the album. And we worked extremely efficiently. So all the vocals were done in a matter of days. Yeah, so everything got done in time, which was very lucky.
Now, having a band member who was also the engineer and operating the studio, did that make it easier to get your ideas, to record the songs the way that you wanted them to sound?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's always a danger that you kind of when you kind of have your own studio and the engineer plays in the band, you can fall in this kind of trap where you never finish working on the product. like nobody tells you to kind of step back and let it kind of live on. But I think it's like from our experience now, I would say that it's worked out very well. Like it's easy to kind of decide on trying to change things up, and then they will just go into the studio and do it quickly in between their normal work days. So it's so I'm very happy with it. And it's much easier as well to not actually involve other people. Like it's, I think it's a very comfortable way to work.
Now, did Snorri also mix and master the album?
Yes, he did. We were talking about sending it out to someone else for mastering, but in the end, we were very happy with. Well, he wanted to try and do it himself first, and then we were happy with what it sounded like.
So we talked about the difference in music, the way your sound has evolved from your previous album to Succession. In terms of the sound of the album, how would you describe the sound in comparison to your previous work?
Well, are you talking about the songwriting or kind of
just the production?
Sound? The production, yeah.
I mean, it sounds very immediate. It's very in your face.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very in your face. But actually, what was done with this album is quite interesting because, I mean, a lot of the songs are quite different from each other. Like they kind of have a basis in different styles of music almost. Some are more kind of based around black metal, and some are more kind of based around hardcore or like more technical, like thrash and death metal. And what was done is that we changed up the whole setting, like the whole setup of the drums, for example, were changed depending on the sound of the song. Like if it was a slow and heavy song, we changed up the drums. Like we used a much bigger kick drum, for example. I think we used about 6 or 7 different snare drums for the album. And also like the amplification on the guitars was changed around a lot. And then we kind of just decided to, like, in the mix, you kind of try to make it sound more like a whole unit, but we kind of focused on making each song its own thing. So, and the idea was also to, like, Snorre had this thought that he works digitally, but he's also very much into a lot of what you get from analog sound, like the warmth you can get from analog sound. So the idea was that we try to have some constraints on how the recording was done, where we didn't want to cut up the drums too much. For example, the songs are kind of glued together from maybe 2 or 3 different takes. So it's not that much cut and paste. And all the effects on the guitars are from pedals instead of just applications in a studio program or plugins or whatever you call them. I'm not an engineer, so I'm kind of not that good on the language.
Yeah. I think people know what you're talking about. Like the in-program mods or simulators or whatever you call them.
Yeah. So it was the idea was to not do anything that wasn't possible before, I don't know, like early 90s or something, to kind of keep the music as alive as possible. So we use a lot of room sounds to kind of get the right sound of the drums and the vocals. We used a lot of room mics to kind of take advantage of the room instead of just using like a plugin for reverb or whatever,
In terms of switching around the instruments and the amps to give each song a different feel or a slightly different sound, is there a reason you wanted each song to stand apart from the rest? Yeah,
I think we kind of felt that when we'd worked in the studio before, we were limited by time and money. And then you just decide, and it's very typical for metal bands that, you often have scarce resources, and you can't really play around. Everyone isn't Metallica. You can't just play around forever, and you kind of have to decide on the sound, and then you stick to that for each and every song. Even though, I mean, for many bands, that the sound they kind of decide upon doesn't necessarily fit to all of their songs. And Snorre and I was actually talking about this beforehand where we kind of made comparisons to a lot of bigger pop albums, where if you listen to something like, I don't know, if you listen to something like Beyonce, for example, you'll hear that the production kind of changes around between the songs, and also the styles of the music changes around changes in each song. And so it's a quite normal way to work in pop music, for example, but it kind of seems to us that it's not that normal to do it with metal. And we really wanted to try that out, to kind of say, okay, let's do the best we can with each song here and try to give them the sound they deserve. Because since it was done in Snorre's studio, we're not that limited by time. So that gave us a lot of freedom to actually do this, to spend the time that was needed to record or to find the sounds. Yeah.
I mean, I think the truth is the reason why most metal bands don't do that is because they walk into the studio saying, we want to sound exactly like Left Hand Path.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Rain and Blood or Transylvanian Hunger or whatever.
Well, I kind of get that as well. The whole thought was kind of new to me also. That it's like, before I discussed this with Snorre, before we recorded, I hadn't really thought of that in those terms. Like, I would also probably have just used like I was used to doing back in the days. So we used to have one reference for, well, not necessarily for the whole sound, but maybe you have a reference for snare sound and you have a reference for guitar sound. Like you said, like you want it to sound like Left Hand Path or something like that. You want that Sunlight Studios kind of guitar. And it's, I don't think I'd really thought about it before we kind of decided on doing this. And I think it turned out really well. Like, for a while, I remember I was concerned about whether it would make the album sound uneven. But through the mixing process and everything made it sound like kind of one thing. Although you can still hear that the songs are different in style, but they kind of belong together still, I think.
Can you tell me a little bit about the label that's releasing this, Maskina? That's your bandmate from Beaten to Death, right?
Yeah, that's true. So again, we're kind of keeping it in the family. It's a small label that he started. I can't remember how long ago, but it's like probably like 15 years ago, something like that. And that was also like the idea of that label is to just release good music, yeah, and not necessarily super heavy music. Like it's released a lot of indie rock bands and some pop music and stuff like that. And like over the course of the last years, like I guess Beaten to Death, our grindcore band, has been like one of the main focuses of the label, and it just felt really easy to and safe to kind of talk to Martin and have him release it, because it's I mean he's a very easygoing dude, and he doesn't live far away from me, so since the rest of the band is in a different country, it's kind of nice to have the label nearby. So yeah.
So Succession is the name of the new She Said Destroy album.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time people hear this podcast, it will be out.
Yeah.
Anders, what's the best way to get Succession? How can people order the album?
The absolute easiest way right now, like the album is being released now in October 2021, and at the moment it will only be released digitally, because I'm fairly certain that a lot of the listeners know this, but there's a lot of backlog when it comes to pressing vinyl and stuff these days because of the pandemic. Like the increase in album releases has been ridiculous internationally, so it's super hard to actually find a pressing plants. So at the moment it will be able on all streaming platforms, but you can also buy and download from our Bandcamp, which is shesaidestroynorway.bandcamp.com. So that's the easiest, and that's kind of where you'll get the news first, and also where we will launch and sell the vinyls or whatever other formats we will press this on.
So is the plan to release the album physically on vinyl and CD once the backlog at the pressing plants is solved?
Yeah, absolutely. A funny thing is that we were on our way to actually order to start the whole pressing process before the summer. But then we took a look at the album and we decided, the album is something like, I can't remember exactly, but something like 55 minutes long or something. And it's a bit too long for a single vinyl, but it's also a bit too short for a double vinyl. So we kind of decided, okay, since this is going to be delayed anyways, let's write and record some extra material for the vinyl, for the physical release. So we've been working on this one song, which is almost finished now. Like with the recording, I've got a bit of vocals left to do, which is going to be like a 15-minute piece, which is kind of a companion piece to the one song EP we released in 2012. So we're just waiting for that to be finished and mixed before we start the pressing. So hopefully it will be released by the beginning of next year or something like that.
Very cool. And if people want to keep up to date with when the physical releases are coming out and when the extended double vinyl version of the album is coming out, what's the best way to follow you guys online?
Well, definitely, I would advise people to follow on Bandcamp. I mean, I think Bandcamp is a great tool for people who want to check out new music. And so our Bandcamp, shesaidestroynorway.bandcamp.com, is definitely the best place to check us out. We also have a Facebook page, which is also She Said Destroy Norway. We have an Instagram, which is the same, She Said Destroy Norway, and we also have a YouTube channel where we'll probably release some, like for the super nerds, we will release some drum playthroughs and stuff like that from that we will record in the studio in Lithuania.
Very cool. And so you mentioned that you guys haven't played live in about 10 years. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
So obviously now is not the ideal time to start playing shows again, but do you guys have plans to do some shows or maybe go back on the road sometime soon?
Well, I have to say that I'm feeling the itch to get back on the road, but it's also quite challenging. Like a couple of us really want to play shows, whereas a couple of others aren't really that much into it. Like so, again, like when we played back in the day, we would have to get some session members in. So it kind of also depends on if that works out and what kind of shows we get. I mean, I'm in my 40s, so I'm not that much into sleeping on floors and and playing punk squats every night anymore.
Trust me, I'm 42. So, there's nothing I like more than sleeping in my own bed.
Exactly. So it's kind of it's really like to play live, but it would have to be at least slightly comfortable, and then it becomes a bit difficult, because since we've been away for so long, it's not like we can just show up and demand stuff. It's when you go away for 10 years, it's like starting anew, at least when you're a small band like we are. So.
And I should mention, you guys are handling the promotion of this yourselves, right?
Yeah, together with the label, and we've also got PR company in Europe that's doing some stuff for us, but a lot of the promotion is done. I do myself, like I used to do back in the days. It's kind of hard to let go.
Well, it is an interesting conundrum, because She Said Destroy encompasses so many different styles and types of music that it's not easy. Ideally, a record label or a PR company will find some kind of snappy way to describe a band, like it's Entombed meets Morbid Angel or whatever. And I think those kinds of simple descriptors don't really work with She Said Destroy. So how do you handle that? How do you describe your music to people who've never heard it before?
Well, that's super difficult. I have the same problem myself. Like, what do I say about this? Other than that, it's kind of based in extreme metal in a way, but it's still, it's fairly technical. It's melodic, but we also have suddenly you just end up listing a bunch of subgenres, and then I guess people kind of start losing interest. So I think it's really difficult myself as well to kind of find that perfect description. I don't know. If you have an idea, let me know, because I think it's super hard, especially since, as you say, promoters and magazines and labels and distributors are very fond of those kind of tags.
Yeah.
Whereas if you take a look at, for example, like the band I mentioned, I remember mentioning this to you the first time we chatted on via email, that I kind of discovered your podcast through an interview you did with Today's Today with Steve Austin. And that band is an example of a band that kind of in the 90s belonged to a scene that was just impossible to pin down. Like the whole scene around Amphetamine Reptile Records in the US. So it's just a bunch of different bands that were kind of noisy and jangly, and some had a lot of metal influences. Some were more like stoner rock or indie rock. And but nobody just called the band anything. Like it was just like a scene of just stuff that was hard to pin down. And I think you still got that, but still everything has to be so super marketable. So that's the kind of the problem that I guess you meet as a musician today if you don't play like a very specific genre.
It's funny, I was just thinking about this earlier today, specifically about Today Is the Day, how they were such a strange band. They did kind of come out of that AmRep noise rock scene, but you can't really compare them to any other noise rock band. Like, they don't sound like Unsane, they don't sound like not. Jesus Lizard, they don't sound like anything like that. And they would use these metal elements like double bass drums and things like that, but never in in a very metal way. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, absolutely.
Today's the Day isn't a band that would like have an epic thrash fest or anything like that. And kind of like they only really had a scene that they could belong to when a bunch of other bands started, you know, basically copying their style, you know. Like Converge took large elements of Today's the Day's sound. I'm friends with guys who are in a band called Meat Jack who were very influenced by Today's the Day. And that's really the only time like you could say that there were other bands that sounded like Today's the Day. I don't know. Like I don't have.
You're completely right, and that's kind of I think what always made me gravitate towards that band. I was like, they've gone through all these different changes as well, but you can always hear that it's the same band, and it doesn't really, as you say, it doesn't really belong in any one scene, like except for when someone tries to copy their style, I guess. Super fascinating, and it's also, as I said, this was an artist that was extremely important for me before starting She's a Destroy. I don't know, it's I don't think you can directly hear any Today's Today influences in our music, actually, but like the whole idea of just try to keep on the move and try to find something which is your own and then kind of keep moving, I guess. Something like that.
That's a good place to end, unless you have something else you want to say.
No, I think I got all my points through. So yeah.
Excellent. Tack så mycket.
Tack ska du ha. Thank you so much for having me, and have a good evening.